This is my story, this is the sound of my voice. This time, it is personal. The cold was the first betrayal. Dr. Tao Adebayo stood outside Toronto Pearson International Airport, his wife and 3 children clustered around him, and wondered if this new land was testing his resolve before it welcomed him. Snow fell gently on his coat collar, white specks settling into his wool hat. The children pressed close, their eyes darting at the strangers rushing past with carts and coats, as if afraid Canada itself might swallow them whole. Beside him, Bimbo was silent. Always silent when she was thinking too much. Her elegance was intact even after 20 hours of travel, her scarf neatly tucked, her lipstick uncracked, but her eyes held the same iron he remembered from Lagos, the iron that never truly forgave. A country warm enough to welcome you, Tao muttered, pulling the collar higher. But cold enough to remind you of everything you left behind. No one laughed. Not even the children. Their first apartment was small, but to the children it was a palace. The walls smelled faintly of paint and the carpet was worn, but the promise of newness lingered in every corner. Tao threw himself into his work with the eagerness of a man chasing redemption. At the hospital, his wit made him magnetic. Nurses laughed at his jokes, fellow doctors admired his calm confidence. He was good at this, the work, the healing, the charm. But at home, silence prowled between him and Bimbo. She scrolled her phone at night, sifting through WhatsApp groups from Nigeria, watching videos of weddings and owambis under the Lagos sun. Sometimes Tao would crawl into bed beside her, eager to break the distance with a joke or a touch. Sometimes she would let him. Most nights, she lay stiff, her back turned, her silence louder than any rejection. He knew why. 5 years had passed since Lagos, but memory had no expiry date. The dim hotel room. Bina's laughter. The look in Bimbo's eyes when she found out he had chosen her friend, of all people, for his weakness. His apologies had been endless. His promises desperate. But nothing had rebuilt the altar of trust she believed he had recklessly burned. Now, in this cold new country, her silence carried the weight of an unfinished agenda. That winter, Tao rediscovered the loneliness of migration. Canada welcomed him warmly in public but left him hollow in private. He dug through his old contact list, calling friends in Nigeria who remembered his swagger, his jokes, his sharp suits. Men who had cheated like him and survived the storm. But none of their laughter over long-distance calls could fill the emptiness in his living room. And then, one night, he found the proof. A bank statement left on the counter. A hotel charge. Small, almost invisible, except he knew what it meant. "Who is he, Bimbo?" His voice cracked. It wasn't rage yet. It was disbelief, a plea. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Only looked at him with the satisfaction of a woman who had been waiting 5 years for this moment. "Now you know how it feels." Snow muffled Toronto like a secret. The city's lights glowed amber against white streets, but to Tao, everything felt muted, like someone had pressed pause on life. At the hospital, he wore his other mask. Dr. Adebayo, the witty Nigerian doctor who made patients laugh while stitching their wounds, who quoted Yoruba proverbs at nurses until they rolled their eyes and giggled. He was admired, even envied. But every evening, when he returned home, the applause died. Bimbo had perfected the art of silence. It wasn't angry silence, not even resentful silence. It was worse, it was silence that had decided not to care. She cooked for the children, ironed their uniforms, checked their homework. She played the role of the dutiful wife, but the intimacy between husband and wife had been amputated long before the move to Canada. Tao felt it most in bed. The distance. The way she lay as if a wall separated them. He missed the days when her laughter filled their Lagos flat, when she teased him about his terrible singing voice, when her body sought his without hesitation. Now, when he reached for her, she either turned away or allowed it, reluctantly, as if doing him a favor. That night, he stood by the window, staring at the frost-forming patterns on the glass. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A WhatsApp message from an old friend in Lagos. Tao Baba. Canada Don Humble UABI? When are you visiting us again? We miss your madness. He chuckled, but it was a hollow sound. He typed a reply, then hesitated. He didn't want to admit that Canada had humbled him, not with its snow or its laws, but with his wife's coldness. It happened quietly. No shouting, no drama. Just a statement on a piece of paper. Tao picked up the bank statement absent-mindedly, flipping through until his eyes froze on a line. Holiday Inn $189.95. He frowned. Checked again. His hands began to shake. That night, after the children had gone to bed, he placed the paper on the table in front of her. Who is he, Bimbo? His voice was low, but his heart thundered in his chest. She didn't look startled. She didn't even look guilty. Slowly, she set down her cup of tea and met his eyes. Now you know how it feels. The words hit him harder than a slap. Tao staggered back, gripping the edge of a chair. You did this? After everything? Bimbo leaned back in her seat, her face expressionless. After everything, she repeated. 5 years of silence doesn't erase what you did. You think I would just carry that pain forever while you laugh your way through life? His chest tightened. Bimbo, that was a mistake. No. That was a choice. Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed sharp. You chose my friend. You chose humiliation. You chose a child outside this marriage. And I chose to remember. Tao felt the room tilting. His mind replayed Bina's laughter, the child's eyes, the weight of his guilt. He thought of the apology letters, the promises, the endless nights begging for forgiveness. He had believed foolishly that time was healing them. But time had only been sharpening her knife. The walls in their apartment had learned the weight of silence. But children always knew how to read the language of silence before adults admitted it. Tola, the eldest at 15, felt it most. She noticed the way her mother no longer looked at her father when he spoke. She noticed the sudden sharpness in her father's voice when he asked questions with answers he already knew. She noticed how dinner time had lost its laughter. One evening, Tola found her younger brother fiddling with the television remote, pretending to be absorbed in cartoons. She knew he was hiding from the sound of raised voices in the bedroom. Their little sister was curled up in the corner with a stuffed bear, sucking her thumb as if she were 5 years younger. Tola marched to the bedroom door and knocked. The shouting stopped, but no one answered. She pushed it open anyway. "Stop it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Just stop it." Her parents turned. Bimbo's face was tight with anger, Teo's with helplessness. Neither looked like the parents she used to know. "You brought us here for a better life," Tola whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "But what's the point if you're destroying us at home?" The room fell silent. The television in the living room echoed faintly down the hall. For once, Bimbo looked away first, her phone slipping from her hand. Teo's shoulders sagged, the receipts he had been clutching tumbling to the floor. In that fragile moment, the children were no longer spectators. They had become collateral. And for the first time, both Tao and Bimbo realized that the cost of their unfinished war was not just each other, it was the family they were supposed to protect. Dr. Tao Adebayo was a man who once believed he had figured out the formula for life: excellence in his profession, respect among peers, humor to carry through hard days, and a marriage steady enough to withstand storms. No drama, no spectacle. Just love. That was the man he wanted to be. That was the marriage he thought he had built. Now, the altar he once placed his family on lay in ruins. Every call from Lagos was a reminder of the life he had broken open. The child he had fathered with Bina, the mistake he swore would never define him, had grown into a shadow that followed him across continents. His phone would buzz late at night, and on the other end was a request dressed in soft insistence: school fees, medical bills. Just a little support. Each time he hung up, guilt sat on his chest like lead. Bimbo knew. She always knew. He never confessed to her when the calls came, but his silence afterwards was a language she had mastered. Her eyes would narrow. Her lips would harden. And her heart, already cracked, would fracture a little more. The woman he married, the fiery, fearless young girl who once dared him to dream bigger, who once laughed so loudly her friends called her firecracker, was back. But not the same. She had returned not as a lover, not even as a partner. She had returned as a rival. Her revenge was not only in her affair, but in the way she carried herself now. Every smile she gave another man, every phone call she took in hushed tones, every cold shoulder she turned to him in bed, it was all a counterbalance. A ledger she was determined to even. Tao would look at her and remember the girl he had fallen in love with, brave, unafraid, full of mischief, and it pained him to see that same fire now burning against him. One night, when the silence became unbearable, he whispered, almost to himself, "Not all love stories stretch forever." Bimbo turned from the window where she had been standing, her silhouette framed by the snowy glow. Her eyes were sharp, unflinching. "No," she said, her voice steady.
The phone calls from Lagos no longer came just at night. They began to invade daylight mid-shift at the hospital, while he walked the children to school, even during church on Sundays. Each time the name flashed on his screen, Teo's chest tightened. He never answered in front of Bimbo. He didn't have to. Her silence had already judged him guilty. One Saturday morning, a letter arrived, postmarked from Nigeria. Bimbo picked it up before he did. The envelope was worn, the handwriting unfamiliar. She stared at it, her eyes sharp with suspicion. before tossing it on the table without a word. Inside was a photo of a boy, dark eyes, sharp chin, a child unmistakably his. Teo's hands trembled as he held the photograph. The boy was smiling, a gap-toothed grin that cut through him like glass. He thought of his own son in Canada, sitting in the living room, identical in age, playing with Lego bricks. Two boys, worlds apart, yet bound by his mistake. Send money, the letter read. He is your blood. Bimbo stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed. So it's true, she said softly, though her voice carried the weight of years. A ghost in Lagos, and we are the ones paying the price. Teo wanted to speak, to explain, but what words could untangle a lie this big? He folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and pressed his forehead into his hands. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Bimbo finally unleashed the fire she had been storing for years. Do you think your secret child disappears because you crossed the ocean? Do you think migration erases shame? No, Teo, it follows, it always follows. Her words echoed in the small apartment. For once, he had no defense, no wit, no charm to hide behind. And yet, deep inside, he also knew this. The child in Lagos would not remain a secret forever. One day, his children in Canada would learn they had a brother thousands of miles away. One day, the truth would sit at the same table with them, demanding its place. The letter did not leave the table for days. Even when the children ran past it on their way to school, even when friends from church came to visit, it sat there like an uninvited guest. Bimbo would glance at it, then at Teo, her silence sharper than any accusation. Teo avoided the table altogether, eating standing up by the counter, his back turned as though refusing to face the ghost staring at him in black and white ink. One night their eldest, Tola, wandered into the living room after hearing muffled voices. She stopped when she saw the photo lying just inside the envelope, slightly exposed. Curious, she pulled it out. A boy with a wide grin stared back at her. For a moment, she thought it was her own brother until she noticed the differences. "Daddy," she whispered, holding up the photo. Teo froze, his heart plummeted. He opened his mouth to speak, but Bimbo stepped in first. "Go to bed, Hola," she said firmly. "That's not for you." The girl lingered, her eyes darting between them. She had seen enough to know something was wrong. Later, when the house was quiet again, Bimbo confronted Teo. "This is it," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "You have a family here, and you have another one in Lagos. How much longer do you think you can live with one foot in both worlds?" Teo tried to plead. "Bimbo, please, I made a mistake. I've been paying for it every day." "No," she cut him off, "you've been hiding it, hiding him. And you've been letting me carry the shame." Her eyes burned with something new, not just anger, but a decision forming. "I will not live like this," she whispered. "Not as your wife, not as your cover, not as your shield. If I stay, it will not be for you." Her words landed like a crack splitting concrete. For the first time, Teo felt the ground under his marriage truly giving way. The Adebayo home had become a place of silences so loud they swallowed even the sound of laughter. Dinner was eaten without conversation, plates scraped quietly, eyes cast down. The children had stopped asking questions, learning quickly that every answer cut deeper than the wound. Bimbo grew sharper in her movements, doors closed harder, footsteps echoed with intent. She had always been fiery, but now the fire wasn't playful, it was a weapon. She spent more time outside the home, dressed with a deliberateness that Teo couldn't ignore. Each smile she gave the world felt like a knife meant for him. Teo, meanwhile, was unraveling in private. At work, his humor was still intact. Patients adored him. Nurses giggled at his Yoruba proverbs. But in the staff bathroom, he would stare at his own reflection, whispering, "Hold it together, Teo, just hold it together." One night, when the children were asleep, the storm broke again. Bimbo stood in the living room, coat still on, her purse dangling from her shoulder. "I can't keep doing this," she said. Living in this half-marriage, pretending for the children, Teo's throat tightened. "So you want to leave?" Her eyes met his, steady and unblinking. "I want to live." The words hit him harder than her earlier revenge. This wasn't anger, it was resolve. She wasn't just punishing him anymore, she was reclaiming herself. That night, Teo sat alone at the kitchen table, the photograph of his son in Lagos in one hand, his wedding ring in the other. For the first time, he admitted what he had feared all along: he might lose everything.
The morning after their confrontation, the apartment felt colder than the Canadian winter outside. Teo sat at the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. He had not slept. Bimbo moved about the kitchen with deliberate calm, setting bowls before the children, her silence a barricade that words could not cross. When the children left for school, she grabbed her coat. "I have errands," she said flatly, and the door clicked shut behind her. It wasn't just an errand. Teo knew it. The distance between them was no longer silence, it was strategy. She was carving out a life beyond him, and every slammed door was a reminder that she had started walking away. That afternoon, his phone buzzed again. Another Lagos call. He silenced it. Then a message followed, and against his better judgment, he opened it. A short video played. The boy, no older than his son in Canada, sat at a wooden table in a small Lagos flat. His school uniform was slightly oversized, his shoes scuffed. But his smile was bright, gap-toothed, filled with innocence. "Daddy," the boy said into the camera, his accent lilting, his tone uncertain. "Mummy says you are in Canada. Will you visit me?" Teo's breath caught. His eyes blurred with tears. The boy looked so much like him, so much like the children he kissed goodnight in Toronto. He pressed the phone against his chest, as though trying to muffle the echo of that one word, "Daddy." Later that evening, when the family sat down to dinner, Bimbo noticed the redness in his eyes. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. She had seen the phone vibrating earlier, had caught the way his fingers trembled when he reached for it. After the children had gone to bed, she finally spoke. "It's only a matter of time before they know," she said quietly. "Secrets don't stay buried forever. And when they learn they have a brother in Lagos, don't think they'll only blame me for my silence." Her voice didn't tremble. It was calm, resolved, as if she had already decided where this path was leading. Teo lowered his head into his hands. The word from the video, "Daddy," echoed in his ears, louder than anything Bimbo could say. For the first time, he realized the battle was no longer just about betrayal, revenge, or survival. It was about legacy, and legacy was something that followed you, no matter how far you ran. The first snowstorm of the season swept across Toronto, covering the streets in white silence. Inside the Adebayo apartment, the silence was just as heavy. But unlike the snow, it did not feel pure, it felt suffocating. Teo had stopped trying to fill it. His jokes no longer reached the children, his Yoruba proverbs hung in the air unanswered. Even the hospital, once his refuge, had become a place of performance. He smiled at patients, bantered with nurses, but behind the bathroom mirror he whispered the truth: "I am losing them." Bimbo, meanwhile, was already building escape routes. She had started attending a professional networking group through a woman she met at church. She came home later than usual, her coat smelling faintly of perfume not her own, her confidence growing in ways that terrified him. One evening, Teo came home early and found a folder on the dining table. Inside were printed rental listings, small apartments across the city circled in pen. His chest tightened. The decision he had feared was no longer unspoken. Bimbo was preparing to leave. That night, after the children were asleep, he confronted her. "You really doing this?" he asked, holding up the folder. She met his gaze without flinching. "You broke this long ago, Teo." I'm just refusing to live in the ruins. He wanted to argue, to plead, but before he could speak, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then set it face down. He caught a glimpse of the name, one he didn't recognize, but the way her lips pressed together told him enough. For the first time, Teo felt what Bimbo must have felt years ago in Lagos, the humiliation of knowing love had moved elsewhere. The fracture line had become visible. And once a fracture appears, it is only a matter of time before the break. The following Sunday, the Adebayo family arrived at church dressed in quiet formality. The children filed into the pew like soldiers, their faces obedient but drained of joy. Bimbo sat rigidly, her Bible open but unread. Beside her, Teo bowed his head, whispering prayers that felt more like negotiations with God. Halfway through the service, his phone buzzed. He tried to silence it quickly, but Bimbo saw the name flash across the screen, Lagos. She turned her head slowly, her expression carved from ice. The children noticed too, their eyes darting between parents who no longer pretended. That evening, the silence at dinner was thicker than the steam rising from their untouched plates. When the children excused themselves, Bimbo remained seated. She watched him across the table, her gaze unblinking. Finally, she spoke. This cannot go on. Teo looked up, weary. Bimbo, please. No, she cut him off, her tone calm but unyielding. You have a family here and another there. You keep calling this a mistake, but it is not. It is your life. And I will not live in its shadow any longer. Her words fell like a gavel. Teo reached across the table, desperate. I can fix this. I can. You cannot fix what you refuse to face, she said. She stood, pushing her chair back with finality. The children deserve peace. And I deserve freedom. She left him at the table, his head sinking into his hands as the clock ticked loudly in the silence. Upstairs, a door clicked shut, and the faint murmur of the children's voices reminded him of what was slipping away. For the first time since leaving Lagos, Teo understood that the question was no longer whether his marriage could survive. It was whether he could survive the loss of it.